Michael leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming against the table as if to mock the silence around him, and then he laughed. Not just a laugh, but the kind that carried weight, a bitter edge, the kind of laugh people use when they want to strip someone else of their dignity. The old man across from him didn't flinch. He only lowered his eyes, his wrinkled hand tightening around the small bronze medal pinned against his chest, as though it wasn't just metal, but memory itself. That's when the air in the room shifted, when the laughter bled into something else, an unease that no one could name but everyone felt. You could almost feel it too, couldn't you? Like being pulled into a moment you had no right to witness, a memory that doesn't belong to you but refuses to let you go. Nobody ever asks the question out loud, the one that hides behind every story like this. What happens when the weight of a man's past collides with the arrogance of the present? No one asks it, because deep down, they know the answer isn't something you can live with once you hear it. But in that room, the silence was asking it for them, pressing down heavy on every chest, daring someone to break it. Michael thought he had broken it with his laugh. He thought he had won. But the old man looked up, then eyes clouded, yet sharp, like glass catching a flame in the dark, and whispered something that not one of us standing there, frozen in that impossible moment, could understand. The sound didn't travel the way it should have. It wasn't just a word, it was a fracture, a sound that slipped past your ears and buried itself in your spine, a sound that carried a name none of us had ever heard before, but somehow recognized in the marrow of our bones. And then it happened. His chair was still there, his glass untouched on the table, his metal glinting faintly in the dim light, but the old man was gone. Not walked out, not fainted, not dragged away, gone, as if the moment he whispered that name, the world decided it couldn't contain him anymore. Nobody screamed, nobody moved. The room itself seemed to hold its breath, as though it knew it had just given us a glimpse of something forbidden, something not meant to exist in daylight. And the metal still there, still shining, seemed to grow heavier in our sight, like an anchor to a truth we weren't ready to carry. Michael reached for it then, his laughter gone, his hand trembling, but before his fingers touched the metal, the glass on the table beside it cracked clean down the middle, a single line splitting it in silence. That was when we all knew the name wasn't finished with us. Do you want me to continue this into a 10,000 character full opening chapter that slowly unravels the mystery, planting clues and emotional dread while keeping that forbidden witness feeling? Michael's hand froze inches above the cracked glass, the silence pressing so hard it felt like it might crush his ribs. His laughter had died in his throat minutes ago, but the sound of it still lingered in his head like an echo that refused to let go, repeating itself, distorted, almost metallic. The metal on the table hadn't moved, but somehow it seemed closer, heavier, pulling at the air like gravity had chosen sides. Everyone in the room stared at the empty chair, waiting for someone to speak, waiting for someone to explain what we all swore we just saw, but no one did. Nobody dared, because if you tried to put it into words, if you said out loud that a man vanished in front of you, then you'd have to admit it was real. And yet was it? Michael swore later, when he tried to tell me, that maybe the old man had never been there at all. He said the metal might have been a prop, a trick. He said maybe his own mind had betrayed him, that the laugh he thought he heard echoing wasn't his laugh at all, but some kind of recording bleeding through the speakers hidden in the walls. The problem was, there were no speakers. The building didn't even have a sound system. Still, when Michael played back his phone later that night, desperate to prove to himself it was real, the recording wasn't what he remembered. It didn't capture the whisper, didn't capture the sudden absence, not even the glass cracking. It caught something else, static, deep static, like an old tape, winding itself too tight, followed by a man's voice not belonging to anyone in the room, low and broken, saying only, "Don't ask it again." Michael swore the voice was his own. That's when I stopped being able to separate the story from the truth, because I remember standing there in that room with him. I remember the metal, the crack, the silence so raw it felt alive. I remember it because I couldn't sleep for 3 nights after, because every time I closed my eyes, I saw the old man's face, not gone but waiting, sitting at the edge of my vision as if I'd left him unfinished. But the more Michael replayed that recording, the more I doubted myself. Had I imagined him too? Had the old man ever existed outside our minds? It was days later when Michael introduced me to Sarah. He said she had been at the gathering too, though I swear on my life I don't remember seeing her there. She had this fragile way of speaking, as if her voice came from somewhere else, delayed, detached, not quite matching the movement of her lips. She told me she remembered it all clearly. The laugh, the whisper, the disappearance. She leaned in close and whispered to me like it was a secret only for us. The name he spoke wasn't for you. That's why you forgot it. I should have walked away right then, but I didn't, because something about the way she said it sounded less like belief and more like warning, like she was trying to protect me from opening a door I couldn't close. The problem was, Sarah wasn't consistent. The next time we met, her story had changed. She said the old man never whispered at all. She said what vanished wasn't him but the metal, that the crack in the glass had been the only real part. And when I told her no, the metal was still there, I had seen it. I had touched it. She tilted her head in that slow, unsettling way, and said, "Are you sure you touched it? Are you sure your memory isn't just filling the gaps?" That's when the paranoia started eating into me. I went back to the building where it happened, thinking maybe the space itself could tell me the truth. But the room was different. Not just rearranged, but wrong. The table wasn't the same table. The chairs didn't match. Even the windows felt narrower, like the whole room had been rebuilt around my memory to make it useless. I asked the staff if an event had taken place there last week, if an old man had been present, if anyone had seen the metal. They looked at me like I was asking for something that didn't exist. One man finally said, almost annoyed, "That floor's been under renovation for months. Nobody's been up there, but I had been. I know I had. I can still feel the weight of the silence pressing down on me, the sound of Michael's laugh splitting into static in my skull. I can still see the metal, gleaming, unyielding. And yet if I can still see it, why didn't my phone capture it? Why did the recording change?" Sarah had an answer for that too. She said sometimes the world edits itself, like a file someone keeps redacting. She said that's why things don't match, why memories shift, why names slip out of reach. She told me once, in that hushed tone, like she was confessing to a crime, "They've been doing it for years. They take things out and leave us with the scraps. That's the truth behind what no one tells you, but here's the thing, I don't know who they are, or if they even exist. I don't know if Sarah's a witness or a fabrication, something my mind built to make sense of what it can't handle. Sometimes when I replay conversations with her in my head, I can't remember if she actually spoke or if I just filled in her words later. Once, when I called her number, the voice on the other end wasn't hers at all. It was the old man's, and he asked me why I laughed. That's when I stopped sleeping altogether. Because now, I don't know if I was ever just a witness. Maybe I was the reason it happened. Maybe the whisper wasn't directed at Michael, or Sarah, or anyone else in that room. Maybe it was meant for me. And if that's true, then the metal, the one that shouldn't exist, the one that seemed to grow heavier with each second, isn't just an object. It's an anchor, a reminder, proof that something really did break through that night, and it hasn't finished with us yet. I don't know if you'll believe me when I say this, but I need you to, because last night, I woke to find the metal on my nightstand. I never brought it home. I swear I never touched it. But it's here now. And the crack in the glass has spread. Do you want me to carry this further into the second act, where paranoia starts consuming both Michael and the narrator, blurring friendship, betrayal, and the possibility that they are the experiment instead of the witnesses? Michael told me he had figured it out. His voice carried that brittle certainty of a man trying to hold his mind together with duct tape. But in the way he spoke, sharp, deliberate, almost relieved, I wanted to believe him. He said the metal was nothing mystical, nothing supernatural at all. He said it belonged to a veteran who'd passed years earlier, and that what we had seen was simply an elaborate misunderstanding, an illusion of grief and suggestion bleeding into our perception. He claimed the whisper we all remembered wasn't a whisper at all, but a half-heard syllable, distorted by faulty acoustics. He called it a memory glitch, one of those tricks the brain plays when it's overwhelmed, a neurological defense mechanism against trauma. And for a moment, for a dangerous, intoxicating moment, it felt like the hidden truth was right there, within reach, clean, rational, something we could file away and leave behind. I sat across from him in a diner off the interstate, a place with buzzing neon and coffee that tasted like ash, and for the first time since that night, I almost felt normal. He had papers spread out across the table. Newspaper clippings, obituaries, archived photographs of forgotten ceremonies where men like the old man had once stood. He traced one of the names with his finger, Thomas E. Ward, deceased 1974, and said, this was the real identity. This was the man. This was the metal. He smiled when he said it, like he had won some small war against the madness. And I let myself believe him. I let myself think, just for a breath, that the nightmare had an ending. But then I noticed the photograph. It wasn't the metal, it was the background, the room where the picture had been taken. My chest tightened before my mind could form words, because I knew that room, the same low ceiling, the same crooked window frame, the same uneven floorboards. It wasn't just similar, it was exact. It was the room where the old man vanished. Only the picture had been dated 50 years earlier. The chairs were the same, the table was the same, and in the far right corner, blurred, was a man leaning back, caught mid-laugh. It was Michael. He didn't notice at first. He was still talking, still piecing together his resolution, still convincing himself and me that the terror had been an illusion. I didn't interrupt him. I couldn't. My stomach had already dropped into that hollow place where dread lives, and the world began to tilt in the way it does when memory and reality line up. The man in the photo couldn't be Michael. It wasn't possible. And yet, the angle of the jaw, the set of the shoulders, even the blurred outline of his hand drumming against the table. It was him. Exactly him. I looked back at him across the diner table, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I was sitting with the same person I had walked in with. He noticed my silence then. His voice faltered. He asked what was wrong, why I looked pale, and I almost told him, but something in me froze, because if he didn't see it if he wasn't supposed to say it. Maybe I wasn't supposed to say it. Maybe the detail itself was the fracture point, the thing holding back everything else. So I slid the photo back under the other papers, nodded, pretended to agree with his rational explanation, but my heart wouldn't stop pounding, because I remembered something else, something I hadn't let myself think about in years. When I was a kid, maybe 8 or 9, I had gone with my father to a community hall for some veterans event. I don't remember why we were there. I only remember the dim lights, the heavy smell of tobacco and sweat, the strange hush that fell whenever a name was read aloud. I remember clinging to my father's coat and staring at the stage where medals gleamed against lined jackets, and I remember one man turning his head, catching my gaze, and smiling. It was the same face, the same eyes as the old man. I told myself for decades that it was just a child's impression, a blurry memory, but now, sitting in that diner with Michael's reflection in the chrome napkin holder, I realized something far more dangerous. It wasn't my first time seeing him vanish. That night, all those years ago, the man with the medal had walked off the stage after receiving his honor, and no one ever mentioned him again. My father told me I was imagining things when I asked. He told me I was tired, that there had been no man with those eyes, no medal, no smile, and I believed him, because children are supposed to believe. But sitting there decades later, staring at a photo dated before I was born, I felt the memory crawl back up my spine, whispering that I hadn't been wrong. The hidden truth was simple, unbearable. This had happened before, and maybe it was happening again, not by accident but by design. That's when the lights in the diner flickered. Just once. Nobody else seemed to care. But in the brief stutter of darkness, I heard it again, that whisper. Not from Michael, not from any visible source, but inside the hum of the neon, inside the static of the air conditioner, inside the pulse of my own blood. Don't ask it again. I couldn't breathe. The false resolution collapsed right there in my chest. Michael kept talking, kept insisting the mystery was solved, that everything was explained. But his words were already drowned out by the weight of what I had just recognized. We weren't uncovering the truth. We were being led to it, step by step, like rats in a maze designed by something watching from behind the glass. Something that had been there from the very beginning, shaping what we saw, what we remembered, what we forgot. And then Michael leaned forward, his face pale, his eyes sharp in a way I hadn't seen before, and asked me quietly, why do you keep looking at me like you've seen me somewhere else? I couldn't answer. Because the moment he asked, the photo on the table shifted, not changed, shifted, like my mind had been tilting it out of alignment until now. And in the corner, next to the laughing figure that looked like Michael, there was another one. Someone blurred, smaller, clinging to the edge of a coat. It was me. Do you want me to continue this into chapter 4, where the narrator starts realizing they are trapped in a cycle of memory and recurrence, that every witness is just a different version of themselves? The messages began long before I admitted they were real. At first they came in the margins of things, half seen, easily dismissed. A strange symbol scratched into the side of a subway seat, a note tucked into the spine of a library book I hadn't even checked out, a familiar name written on the underside of a diner receipt. Each time I told myself it was coincidence, the human brain seeing patterns where none existed, the same way we see faces in shadows or hear voices in the static. But patterns don't repeat in the same shape across years, across places, across people who shouldn't know each other. Patterns don't wait for you. Patterns don't write back. The first time I understood I wasn't alone was the night I dreamed of the medal again, only this time the dream didn't belong to me. I awoke to a message on my phone from a number not in my contacts. You saw it too. No introduction, no explanation, no name, just those words, and a photograph attached. Blurry, grainy, but recognizable, the same cracked glass, the same metal glinting under weak light, except the angle was wrong, impossible. It was from above, as if someone had been standing over my shoulder when the event happened, someone I never saw. I stared at the image until the edges of it seemed to warp, until I wasn't sure if I was remembering the moment or inventing it. And that's when I realized I wasn't the only one being watched. The messages didn't stop. They came from different numbers, emails with no return address, letters without stamps. They always carried fragments, never full answers, coordinates, dates, old photographs that looked like they were pulled from forgotten attics. One envelope held nothing but a line written in a shaky hand. You were right all along. But right about what? I didn't even know what I believed anymore. Every time I thought I had reached the core, the ground cracked open again, revealing another layer beneath. And through it all, I felt the press of unseen eyes. Not hostile exactly, but unrelenting. as if my thoughts were being measured against a scale I didn't understand. That was when I found out about the others. Not directly, never through something clean like a conversation. Instead, they bled into my life like ghosts stepping sideways into view. A woman in a coffee shop wearing the medal as a pendant, but refusing to meet my eyes. A man on the train sketching the cracked glass in the corner of his notebook before tearing the page out and sliding it into my bag. Children on a playground chanting a rhyme I couldn't fully catch, but the cadence matched the whisper we all heard that night. I wanted to ask them what they knew, but every time I tried, the moment dissolved, leaving me standing alone with a mouth full of unspoken words. Sarah reappeared then, but not in the way I expected. She didn't come to me. I found her, or maybe she let herself be found. She was waiting in the back of a church that smelled of mildew and dust, staring up at stained glass that glowed faintly, even though it was night outside. She didn't greet me. She only whispered, "They've been watching since before you were born. That's why you don't remember everything. That's why the pieces don't fit. It's not your memory that's broken. It's theirs." Her hands shook when she spoke, and in the candlelight her face looked both older and younger than the last time I saw her, as if time itself didn't quite know how to hold her anymore. She told me the truth wasn't something we could read in a file or uncover in an archive. It was something alive, something that moved through us, changing what we saw, what we remembered, what we were. I wanted to believe her, but Sarah had always been unreliable, her story shifting like sand. And yet when I left the church, I saw the same symbol carved into the stone by the door. The one I'd seen in subway seats, in notebooks, in letters. A circle split by a jagged line, like the crack in the glass. I traced it with my finger, and for a moment it felt warm, not like stone at all. That night I dreamed again, but the dream wasn't mine. I was standing in a room I didn't recognize, but I knew the smell of tobacco, damp wood, the echo of voices calling out names. The Veterans Hall, the same one from my childhood memory. Only this time, I wasn't the child clinging to my father's coat. I was at the podium, metal pinned to my chest, staring down at faces I knew and didn't know. And in the back row, blurred, waiting, was me, watching myself, recording it. I woke with my skin damp and my phone buzzing in my hand. A new message. No number, no words, just a video file labeled found footage from 20 years ago. The footage was grainy, handheld, the kind of tape you'd find in a box in someone's basement. It showed a room I recognized instantly, the same hall, the same stage, the same crooked window. The camera panned shakily across the audience, across faces frozen in time, and then it landed on a child sitting stiffly, eyes wide, fingers clutching a coat. Meek. I should have stopped it there, but I couldn't. My hand was trembling, my breath catching, because the camera swung back to the stage, and standing there wasn't the old man, but Michael. Decades younger, unchanged, metal gleaming. He lifted his head, looked straight into the lens, and smiled. The footage cut to static. I couldn't breathe. My body shook with the realization that this wasn't just memory twisting itself. This wasn't just a hallucination. There was a record, something physical, something the world had allowed to exist. But why was it given to me? Why now? And more importantly, who filmed it? Who had been watching us all this time? That's when the third voice entered. Not through dreams, not through whispers, not through fragile figures like Sarah. This voice arrived in a letter slipped under my door. Plain paper, no handwriting, I recognized. I've been documenting everything. You're not crazy, they lied to you. You were right all along. Stop listening to them and start listening to me. I read the words over and over until they blurred, because for the first time, it felt like someone wasn't trying to confuse me, wasn't trying to bury the truth under contradictions and half memories. This person, whoever they were, claimed to be outside the loop, an observer, a witness who hadn't been tampered with. The letter ended with a single line that burned into me. Look closer at Michael. He's not who you think he is. I wanted to dismiss it. I wanted to believe Michael was just as trapped as I was, just another victim of whatever force had been threading through our lives. But the footage, the impossible footage, wouldn't let me. It was him. It had always been him. And suddenly, every moment replayed in my head with new clarity. Every laugh, every whisper, every flicker of silence. He wasn't just part of it, he was the hinge, the pivot, the thing that never changed, no matter how many times the memory folded and unfolded. And yet Evan, as I write this, even as the walls seem to pulse with the weight of eyes I cannot see, I wonder if the third voice can be trusted. Because if they've been watching all along, documenting everything, then they've been here since the beginning too. They've been here longer than Sarah, longer than Michael, longer than me. Which leaves me with only one unbearable question. What if the observer isn't outside the story at all? What if it's you? Would you like me to build chapter 5, so that the audience themselves begin receiving secret cues in the text phrases, embedded codes, and triggers, making them feel complicit in the conspiracy? I didn't notice how much weight I had been carrying until the night it broke me. Not the weight of the metal, not the burden of the whispers, not even the terror of being watched, but the weight of silence. The weight of pretending I didn't already know the truth. It had been circling me for years, maybe decades, threading itself through half-remembered moments and fractured dreams, rewriting itself in photographs, recordings, and memories that never lined up. And for so long, I told myself the only thing I had to do was solve it, find the missing piece, expose the hidden truth, end the cycle. But what if the truth isn't meant to be solved? That question gnawed at me as I sat across from Michael one last time. He looked older somehow, though no time had passed. The lines on his face weren't aged so much as history pressed into skin. He didn't smile anymore. He didn't laugh. He only studied me with that sharp, unsettling calm, as though he was waiting for me to admit something I hadn't even let myself think yet. On the table between us lay the metal, its surface scratched, dulled, but still impossibly heavy, like it contained more than metal, like it contained memory itself. "Why me?" I finally asked. My voice sounded small, like it belonged to someone else. "Why us?" Michael didn't answer right away. He leaned back, his eyes flicking to the metal as if it might answer for him. And then, so quietly, I almost missed it, he said, "Because you laughed." The words hit me harder than I expected. They weren't an accusation, not exactly. They were a reminder. A knife twisting in a wound I didn't realize I'd been hiding. He was right. I had laughed that night. I had laughed to strip the old man of his dignity, to shield myself from the weight of his silence. I had laughed because I was afraid, and maybe that was the moment everything fractured, the moment the cycle locked me in. Maybe this wasn't about metals or whispers or vanished men at all. Maybe it was about the things we do to survive the cruelty, the denial, the refusal to see another human being's pain. I wanted to deny it, but memory is merciless when it wakes. I saw the old man's eyes again, not blurred by fear this time, but clear, steady, unbearably human. I saw the way he held the metal, not as proof of pride, but as proof of what he had endured, of what no one else could carry for him. And I saw myself, younger, colder, hiding behind a laugh because I couldn't bear to feel what he carried. And then came the confession, the one I had never let myself speak. I whispered it across the table, barely breathing. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to see any of it. I wanted him gone. Michael didn't move, didn't speak, but the metal seemed to darken as I said it, as though my words had weight of their own. And in that silence, I understood the most terrifying thing of all. Maybe I hadn't just witnessed the vanishing. Maybe I had caused it, not with magic, not with power, but with my refusal to face the truth of another person's suffering. Maybe that's all it takes to make someone disappear, not seeing them, not remembering them. The room grew heavy then, unbearably heavy, like the air itself wanted me to choose. Believe the truth, and let it crush me. Or deny it again, and let the cycle continue. My hands trembled above the metal, the same way they had the first night, and I knew touching it would change everything. I could carry it, finally, as it was meant to be carried, not as an object, but as a weight I could no longer deny. Or I could walk away and pretend again that none of this had ever happened, that it was all memory glitches, conspiracy, paranoia. Michael leaned forward. His voice was steady, but his eyes looked almost pleading. Once you touch it, you can't give it back. And maybe that's what life is, choosing what we carry, choosing what truths we can live with, choosing whether we let ourselves be destroyed or remade by the weight of what others leave behind. Maybe that's what it means to be human. Not the certainty of answers, but the terror of responsibility. I pressed my fingers to the metal, and everything shattered. Not the room, not the table. Me. I saw myself reflected in 1,000 memories that weren't mine, faces I'd never lived, voices I'd never spoken, lifetimes I had laughed at and turned away from. I saw the others too, the ones who had left me messages, who had watched from the edges, who had slipped symbols into the world like breadcrumbs. They weren't strangers, they were me, different versions of me, scattered across cycles of memory and denial, trying desperately to wake me up, trying desperately to keep me from laughing again. The force behind it, or whatever it is, whatever it has always been, was never hiding. It was watching, waiting, patient as silence. It didn't need to manipulate the world. It only needed us to look away from each other, to choose, not to remember. And in that moment of unbearable clarity, I understood. The truth doesn't destroy you. The refusal to see it does. When I opened my eyes, Michael was gone. The metal lay cold in my palm, heavier than bone, heavier than history, heavier than forgiveness. I didn't know if I had been saved or condemned. I only knew that I couldn't laugh anymore. The screen in front of you flickers now, doesn't it? You feel the weight too. You remember the silence, even if you tell yourself you don't. That's the part they never release. The part hidden in found footage and memory glitches and stories whispered across generations. That's the part they never wanted you to see. And if you've come this far, maybe you've already felt it, the shift, the fracture, the moment when the story stops being mine and becomes yours. Because some truths don't stay buried. Some truths don't stay forgotten. Some truths live in the silence between us, waiting for someone, anyone, to finally carry them. And maybe that someone is you. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.